here it is at the end of the week, and we're delighted to have Rafi Farber. Rafi, welcome to the channel. And, I've been watching you forever, especially your Friday reports on Arcadia. They're just astounding. One of the ones that I remember just that was so illuminating and rarely talked about is the era in which we may see silver used to purchase property, including a house. What sort of research did you do to come to those sorts of conclusions? Because that's sort of something that stackers, we have to stack with some sort of end game. So, and also I read your blog and follow your channel, The Endgame Investor. So I'm delighted to talk to you today. You're really one of our heroes. Go ahead.
Cool. So that it sounds kind of. I think the title of that video was 75 ounces of silver for a house. That didn't even intend that to be clickbaity or anything. I was just making a calculation, and I just want to clarify what that means. Like, I don't think there's going to be a stable period of time in history where real estate's going to go for 75 ounces for like a prolonged period of time. That's not what I was saying. I don't think it's going to be if it happens, which I think it will happen. It'll happen for maybe a few days. And the math is actually pretty simple. So before we get to the math, the logic behind it, or the principle behind it, is that when a hyperinflationary economy, since money is a commodity, I know the dollar is just a money substitute, and Bitcoin over that is a dollar substitute. And we live in a monetary pyramid where, Extra's pyramid, where everything branches up and up and up the farther into the derivative level you get. But at bottom, real money is a commodity. So in a hyperinflationary commodity, what's happening is that the money substitute no longer substitutes for the money. So you have a severe money shortage. And a severe money shortage means money is very, very expensive. And when an economy doesn't have a money, it must at all costs, literally all costs, it must import that money in order to rebuild a division of labor. Otherwise, there's no division of labor, and you get into a real, bona fide momish zombie apocalypse where people can't trade, and if they can't trade, they kill each other because everyone needs their resources to survive, and people would rather trade than murder each other. Okay, that's a good thing. But if there's no money, then you're in real trouble. So in a hyperinflationary economy where there's no substitute for the dead currency that is being circulated, then there's no choice but to go to gold and silver. Like in a country like, let's say, Zimbabwe or Lebanon or Venezuela, you can still move back to the dollar because the dollar still works as a gold substitute. It's a very inflated one. It's a very bad one, but it still sort of works. So rather than going to gold and silver directly, Venezuelans or Zimbabweans or Lebanese now, they will go to the dollar. And we see that in every hyperinflationary economy. But in the scenario where the dollar itself, which is the chief gold substitute, where that doesn't work anymore, you can't go to any other currency. You can't go to the euro. You can't go to the yen because the euro and the yen are derivatives of the dollar also. So when the dollar collapses, there is no choice but to go to gold. Okay, but there's a problem with gold. It's too valuable. So there is a natural gold substitute when gold substitutes not gold substitute, a gold competitor, right? The dollar is not a competitor to gold. It is a substitute for gold. A competitor to gold, the main competitor to gold is silver. Now, when there's no gold substitute that works, then in order to buy stuff on a retail level, you can't go into a store with a gold coin and buy food, right? You'll have to buy an entire aisle or a truckload of food, and that's not going to work for retail purchases, right? It'll work for wholesale. So I didn't even look at it. I mean, I looked at Aleister MacLeod's history, and I checked on it, and he was saying, and he's right, that a nice upper class house in Berlin at the peak of the hyperinflation, when money substitutes did not work, when the mark no longer worked at all, people were selling houses for about $100 bill. $100 bill back in 1923, that gold was a bona fide, stable, honest, sort of honest gold substitute in 1923. So each dollar stood for a 1/21th ounce of gold. So $21 was an ounce. So $100 is about 5 ounces of gold. Now at the peak, so you could exchange 5 ounces of gold represented by a $100 bill for a house in Berlin on average at the peak of the hyperinflationary insanity. Now, at the peak of hyperinflation, when you can't, if the dollar is collapsing and you can't use gold for retail purchases, the public will demand silver because there will be no other way they can trade. They'll have to use silver coins to trade. There's no other choice. Now, at the peak of a panic, we generally see the gold to silver ratio move down to 15 to 1, which is historically the monetary average, right? Before there were dollar bills, before there were gold substitutes, there were silver coins and gold coins. And when both metals are trading as a bona fide money directly, you'll have a 15 to 1 ratio. And that is going to be the situation in the immediate aftermath of the endgame, because there won't be any gold substitutes that work. It'll take some time to create new ones that are trustworthy. In the meantime, people are gonna have to trade in silver coins. So if you can buy a house in Berlin for $100 bill, 5 ounces of gold, and we have a 15 to 1 gold to silver ratio at the peak of a panic, 15 times 5 is 75. Now my point is, if you see that by calculation you can buy a house for 75 ounces of silver, do it. Okay, get rid
Right.
of your silver, get some stuff, because you're not going to get any better than that. It's not going to last for more than a few days, and that will be the signal that we're at peak panic, and that's the bell ringing. Get rid of like most of your stacks, keep a little bit for safety, but that's when you want to start spending because the economy needs money and you have it, so save people.
I love that analogy, and I think we've seen, let's say, when Athens fell to Rome, and then Rome was invaded, and then we've had many reserve currencies, starting with Portugal to Spain, to the Dutch guilder, to the British pound, and now the dollar. But it appears that the dollar, as of last month, lost when Saudi says they're joining BRICS. So that brilliant economist, not as good as you, Rafi, but there's Sergei Glassiev out of Russia, who devised this gram of gold for a barrel of oil. That appears to be sort of what you're talking about, real things, but we can't strap a barrel of oil on our backs and walk around. Therefore, gold and silver are the only things that are portable, divisible, fungible, store value, and all the physical and monetary characteristics. So what are you seeing when you talk about, I understand the Weimar analogy. Let's do the check mark of things we're seeing today that almost appear similar to that in terms of maybe lack of trust. What are the things that set up Weimar's collapse that are similar to what we're seeing in Europe and the United States in terms of just maybe banking and over? You have a great historical lens. Do you mind telling our viewers about that a bit?
Okay, so I haven't done like serious research into Weimar. I've read some, popular books, like Adam Ferguson's When Money Dies, a few novels about what was going on a street level in hyperinflationary Germany. What was called the Black Obelisk by Eric Maria Lamarck, who wrote when the belt no, not When the Bell Tolls. That's what's his name? The American guy who lived in Florida. Forgot his name.
Hemingway,
All
maybe?
quiet. Yeah. All quiet on the Western Front. He wrote all quiet on the Western Front. He wrote a book about a novel about what was going on in Germany and the hyperinflation called the Black Obelisk. One of my subscribers recommended it to me, so I read it, and what was basically going on there. Look, we could go into the very nitpicky exact reasons why the hyperinflation happened in Germany.
Oh, let's just talk. Okay, forget
Yeah,
Germany. What do you see going on around you in Europe and the United
yeah.
States specifically that
Okay, so what I'm seeing now is, again, I'll talk about this from a set of principles and then where we are now, and it all depends on where in the curve we are, because all this process is always the same,
right?
right? If that once you start an inflationary monetary system, right, there is no escape from it. Once you print that first dollar or that first substitute that isn't 100% substitute for an actual commodity you're digging up, then there's no stopping it. Because when you create these substitutes, it creates demand for stuff, usually in the financial realm, right? And the Wall Street equivalent of whatever country you're printing for, and it strengthens the banking system because they're the ones that loan it out, and then they gather more resources for themselves. Every so often there's a crisis where the inflation is revealed for what it is, for a fraud, and then the financial system kind of takes a lurch down, where all the crap that they build up in that inflationary time has to fall away, and then a central bank or some kind of authority has to inflate them out of it and create more substitutes so that the Wall Street people in whatever country you're in continue with their system, because the the problem is that the financial people, they house the assets of the people that think they have assets. So they think that
Right.
when their bank falls, they lose everything, and if their bank doesn't fall, they don't lose everything. But the fact is, they don't have it either way, right? They can keep pretending to have it, and that pretending can be elongated with another round of inflation. But eventually, you inflate so much that the unit that you're inflating itself dies, and then everybody with every dollar loses everything that they thought they had in dollars. Right? When you open up your brokerage account and you see a dollar number quoted there, your account is worth $500,000 in stocks, bonds, and whatever it is that you own there. You don't have those $500,000. How many of those dollars actually exist? I don't know, maybe like 1,000 of them, right? So the rest is just inflation, and you're trying. And if you sell it while people are still they still want the stuff, you can get their inflation for you, and then cash out, and then maybe buy some gold. You could still do that. Like you can get out of the game of musical chairs, but eventually it all goes to hell, and that is unavoidable because everything else, because it's all fake. So we're on the verge of that, be, because if you just look at the curve of the money supply,
Right.
it's curving up now,
Well,
and
let's talk about the money
right.
supply. We've seen now that if the Fed fund rate is whatever, 5.5,
Mhm.
and the debt is 32 trillion, now we have the largest line item on our budget that exceeds, even the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, which is really both what funds these 57 undeclared wars since
Mhm.
World War II, plus entitlements, which are unfunded liabilities. I think we're there. I think we can argue, and the banks have zero reserve requirement. So they're not serious about fighting inflation, or they would at least have some reserve requirement. That would reduce the money supply. But so we're there. We're there at the end game. We can argue whether it's this decade. It appears to be, with BRICS toppling the dollar, which is inevitable. That's not,
Mhm.
when or it is a when thing, not if. So what are you doing to prepare? I mean, you're just so academic and entertaining, which is rare. Usually the academic people are so boring, and usually the entertaining people don't have the brain in their skull to break down the
Mhm.
what to do strategically. So, I know you have your private group of people that subscribe to your Patreon or whatever, or is it your Substack? I'm not sure. I apologize. But what are you telling these people? Or do we have to join up? Now, give us a sneak look
Okay.
into some strategies, like maybe keep it simple, 3 or 4.
Okay, so I do have strategies, and I am doing things, and I can share them. They're not a secret.
Okay.
What I do at the end game investor basically is I'm not like a professional prepper or anything. I don't give prepping advice. What my job is to keep people intellectually focused on what reality is, so that they're not emotionally phased by crazy price volatility as we get closer to the end game, right? We hear all this complaining about, oh, why isn't gold and silver doing this? The bankers will always be in control. They'll give us a CBDC, and then they'll have everything, and then we'll be slaves forever. And my job is to say, no, no, that's not going to happen. Calm down. It's never happened before. Evil never wins entirely. They get to a peak and then they crash, just like the a hyperinflationary system itself gets to a peak and crashes. That's what evil does. It's the fall of the Tower of Babel, and to reinforce the logic no matter what's happening, and just to keep people level and focused and emotionally okay. That's what I do. In terms of what I'm doing to prep, Stacking gold and silver, obviously, in different places, not just at home, not just in a safe, not and some in gold stocks, some in silver stocks, some in vaults and other places. Spread it out because I don't know what's going to fall. I don't know what's not going to fall. I don't want it all with me because if somebody comes with more guns than I have and just takes it, that's possible too. I don't know. Um, so I'm just trying to be wise without panicking. The other thing I do is I have and people with more skills than me in this area can do more than I can. And I have chickens in my backyard, so I have a supply of eggs. I can feed them my garbage, and they can give me eggs. I'm making connections with local farmers, buying from them now, so they know who I am when it comes to it, and then I can give them a call when the shekel doesn't work or the dollar doesn't work, and I can say, look, I have real money. Can you give me some food? And we'll trade on the low. So that kind of thing. Um, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to be rational and be calm and make local connections with people who have skills, so I know who to turn to if I need something.
Yeah,
Uh,
those are great strategies. And I really believe I've seen, having raised children, this sort of distractibility. They're on their devices all the time, looking down. And what you're talking about is making, is peer-to-peer human interactions that are laced with authenticity, making those connections now, which are going to be super valuable to leverage.
yeah,
We live in an area near a lot of Amish people, and I've always joked with my wife that they're going to
they're
have,
great. They're great to get to know.
I
Yeah,
know they're going to have the last laugh because I do see power outages in my future. It's just always been a playbook of I call them the parasitic class or the ruling class, is to cut off someone's power or lock us down. And once again, if you cut off someone's power, what good is your Bitcoin wallet? That's why physical hard assets, I think, will do well. I don't think anyone in the Amish community would accept Bitcoin, nor would I ever trust the counterparty risk of a cyber attack. So I like what you're doing. I like that are you allowed to disclose what part of the world you're doing this in? Are you in Israel? Are you in?
yeah. Well, right now I'm in Florida, but I live
Okay,
in I
gotcha.
live in Israel. I live in the Golan, way out there where nobody is.
Okay. Have you been?
So
Yeah, okay. I'm familiar with Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. My wife
yeah,
and I are watching
I don't want to be in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv's going to be like, the this ground zero of the zombie apocalypse, of whatever degree of zombie apocalypse happens. It's
right.
going to be centered on Tel Aviv. I don't
Well,
want.
yeah, it would be US's Manhattan. I get it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it'd be an awful place to be, but I'm glad that you've spent some time in what I consider the cradle of civilization. Um, and I do admire the fact that you also have roots in the Old Testament. And if you don't mind sharing a little bit of what you've learned from some of those, ancient books and texts in terms of silver and gold as money and their historical value in those times. I know that's a big thing, a big question, but I know that's one of your areas of expertise, and it's
yeah.
intriguing to me. Do you mind
Well,
sharing? Just
there's a lot to say about that. Not just Old Testament from all. I don't call it Old Testament. I call it the Torah, the Testament, and you can there's a lot about gold and silver. One just two quick lessons I guess I could give. I can't the before Adam is created in the garden. There's a few verses about where Eden is situated, and like it's around this river and that river, and there's four rivers that feed it. And you're reading this, and you're like, what do I need to know? Like, who cares where this thing is?
I think it was the Tigris and Euphrates
Yeah,
River.
yeah. It
Okay.
gives the Hidekel, Nahar Gadol, Nahar Prat, all these rivers, and then it says like in one and Eretz Chavila, there's this place called Chavila where there's all these precious stones there, and there's gold, and the gold of that land is good, and you're like, okay, so what? And then it describes and then he creates man and he puts him in the Garden of Eden. So you're like, well, why are you telling me that there's gold in this land and it's good? Like, what does it matter? And I think that you could say a lot of things. I mean, there's no one lesson that you can learn from this, but the lesson that I could give out, that I could tease out from this for stackers, is that before God even created society, He created the elements that are needed for trade. Right? That gold existed before man existed as a spiritual being. I don't think that Adam was the first Homo sapiens or the first animal that sort of looked like us with a big brain, but I do think he was the first one that realized that he was created by something else above him. So that's what I call the first man, somebody who has the potential for a connection to the divine. I don't think any of the other previous human species before us really understood that at all. But there was a point when we did, and that was Adam. Um, so that lesson is that gold is really the basis for trade, and he set it up for society before there was even society. The second lesson, two more lessons. So the other lesson I can give for stackers is that before the Israelites left Egypt, before we left Egypt, I say, because these are my grandparents, we were given one commandment by Moses, who heard it from God, who told him that before they leave, they have to go into their neighbors' houses and ask for the gold and silver. Right? That's what we have to do. And that was what we did. We went into our neighbors' houses, into the Egyptians' houses, and we said, well, please give me your gold and silver. We're going for a party out in the desert to sacrifice to our God, and we need all your stuff. So we took all their gold and silver, and which originally was ours anyway from Joseph, who brought it in. Right? How did Joseph take over the government? He monopolized the gold and silver supply. That's what he did, and then we took it back. So the point is, before hell breaks loose, before the zombie apocalypse, before the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, you want to stack before that, because when everyone's panicking and everyone's dying, you're not going to be able to ask nicely. So
Right.
stack before the world ends, not after. You're not going to be able to after. So get the gold and silver first, and then have a nice dinner, have a nice Seder, have a nice Passover, and then get out. The final lesson, the most recent one that I found, was there. Somebody shared with me a Christian Bible story, about some woman who found a silver coin, or she was missing a silver coin, and then she found it, like a little silver coin, and then she was so happy that she found it that she threw the whole party for her block. She threw a block party on a silver coin. So the point was, like, according to the Bible, silver is very expensive. Fine, maybe. And I would listen to the Christian Bible in terms of a historical record. I have no doubt that something like that could have happened. The other thing is that in Solomon's time, silver was worthless. It literally says that, because everyone was so rich during King Solomon's time. There was so much gold. Gold was so plentiful that it itself could be used in retail purchases. That if somebody dropped a silver piece, or dropped a piece of silver, then they wouldn't even pick it up. It wouldn't be worth it. It would be like dropping a penny. It'd be like, oh, whatever, somebody else will find it. So the point is that whether silver is expensive or cheap depends on whether your society is rich or poor. Now, if you translate that into what happens when everyone has dollars and all of a sudden dollars are worthless, then everyone is suddenly very, very poor. So in a society where everyone goes suddenly very, very poor, silver can go like crazy very, very quickly, which I think is exactly what's going to happen. So the Bible doesn't say that silver is valuable or silver is cheap. It says it changes based on society.
Well, those are good lessons. Let's say there's people that are of the faith or not. It wouldn't matter, because those are still good metaphors that we can apply to many contexts in terms of, I'm especially interested in what you said about times where there was gold that was plentiful compared to today. If you look what they call about the hardness of money, let's say there's 7 to 8 thousand or billion tons above ground. That stock has kind of stayed constant for a long time, relative to as much gold effort in mining each year is only about maybe a quarter to a half% relative to that stock, what we call the stock to flow ratio, making it the best kind of money out there, right? Because it's hard to produce. It can't be printed, right? Gold. What are your thoughts on the physical inventory of gold above ground versus the physical inventory of silver above ground? Would you, because there's so much misinformation coming from the Silver Institute on, they will talk about that there's a deficit based on solar and electronics and use of silver in war. And I think there's 10,000 applications for silver, especially with all the circuitry, and it's the best conductor of electricity. But would you have a guess on what we think the ratios are in terms? I know with mining effort, it's about 9 to 1 for every ounce of gold that's mined. There's about 9 ounces of silver. But what do you think about
Well,
physical above ground inventories, or does it matter?
okay, so my thoughts on that is I don't really so I'm going to answer the question, but let me just preface it with I don't really look into the silver market in terms of silver as a commodity. For that kind of stuff, you would have to look at Jeff Christian, someone who's a real silver industry expert and with expertise that I don't have. But still, what I would say is that look, the reality is, and what you said about 9-to-1 mining makes sense. The reality is that gold and silver have been the best monies for since we've had civilization. There have
Right,
been other monies in areas or local economies where there isn't enough gold and silver supply for whatever reason,
right.
whether we're talking about Virginia in the colonial times where they used tobacco, or in a prison where they can't get gold and silver in, so they use tins of mackerel. I'm not saying other monies can't exist, but I'm saying the best ones are gold and silver.
Wait,
Why?
what? I missed the one for prison. It was what? Drugs?
Mackerel tins or
Oh,
cigarettes.
okay.
It could be different things depending on the prison, but that's in an artificial economy where it's locked down.
Right.
So one of the reasons, there are many reasons, but one of the reasons that you touched on just now in your question here, why gold is such a good money, is that the supply of it tends to increase in proportion with the population. Because as the population grows, that means we have more technology to dig stuff out of the ground, to grow food, to supply what these people need to live, which means our capital is getting better, our technology is getting better, which also means that our mining technology gets better in proportion with that. So as technology, as society grows, the gold supply grows in proportion with it. I'm not sure. I think it's in percentage. Like if the global population increases by 2%, then the global mine supply would increase by about 2%. It's not exactly, but it fluctuates. It goes in a very nice curve, right? So silver, it's the same with silver. We've been mining gold forever. We've been mining silver forever, and the supply and the pockets and the way that it's mined and where it's deposited in the Earth's crust, yeah, it's generally 9-to-1. So then, why do we see a 15-to-1 ratio of gold to silver when they're both used as monies? Because a lot of that silver is going to other uses because silver also is an industrial metal. It's just less of an industrial metal than, let's say, copper or something. So my point is that the world hasn't changed. There's nothing new under the sun. Silver will continue to be used for some industrial purposes, but monetary demand for silver is much more intense than any industrial demand could be, because the demand for money is by everybody, because everybody needs money to be part of the division of labor. So when silver is once again a money for however long it's going to be a money directly, when there's no other choice to use anything but silver, then we'll be down to a 15-to-1 ratio again. So it kind of links back into the first question. So just it doesn't really matter exactly what the numbers are. Just they're going to be around what they have historically been, 15-to-1, with gold increasing in value as people get poorer.
I have no follow up to that. And I think in order to serve the community best, we're going to wrap this up and put links in the description field on where there'll be follow up. I actually publish on a Substack that's free. That'll where this video will live, as well as on a few other channels. And then I want to talk to Rafi off air for a sec. And don't be jealous, everyone. Everyone, we're easy to find. You can find us all on Twitter. Rafi's one of the few that has actually has enabled the chat. And now that I told him everyone that, he'll probably disable that feature. But he's very transparent and accessible, and quite a gift to us all in terms of further continuing ed. And we're really grateful to you today, Mr. Farber or Rafi. What is Rafi, a nickname?
Raphael.
Oh, great. Raphael, cool. Well, I'm glad you're in Florida and part-time in Israel, and that you're preparing, though you're not
I'm
like,
full time. I'm full time in Israel. I'm just here for a few weeks and I'm going back.
oh, okay. Well, welcome to the States. It's awful here. We're all going to run for our lives and talk to Doug Casey about our second passport, or Simon Black. But It's been our pleasure. We're going to wrap this up in 3, 2, 1. We'll see you next week, and Rafi will be back with us soon. Thank you so much, Rafi.
Thank you, John.